Okay, so the idea is how do we make our own material in Revit? Let me create very fast a project, and I'm gonna try to talk about also materials in general a bit. I'm selecting the wall. I'm also making the top constraint to level 2. There you go. I'm going to make a roof very fast. Select all the walls by pressing the tab, touch top base so they get connected to the bottom. There we go. Level 2, level 1. I'll place some windows. Here one, and then copy multiple. Okay, I'm going to make one of the walls curtain wall. Let's see what kind of curtain wall we have. I'm going to select that, edit type, and I'm going to duplicate that curtain wall. Because remember, every time you edit something, I recommend that you duplicate it first. And I'm going to change under the edit type the types of vertical grid and horizontal grid, which is, you can say how many cuts you have. We talked, there's a previous video that talks about how you introduce your own cuts, horizontal, vertical, whatever, but this is numerical number of cuts. Fixed distance, for example, I can say, okay, nice, edit type again. And now I can go to the section of mullions. Interior type could be smaller, border could be a little bit bigger. There you go. We definitely need a floor in the bottom. We do have a roof, and the floor will be lightweight concrete, rectangle. Say okay. I'm gonna go to the 3D, make sure things are looking good. And I'm gonna place a couple of doors here. And I have these doors. I'm gonna load some more doors from the family. Let's go to doors, residential, for example. And I can, go downwards, and maybe some light could be nice. Select those types. They will come in. And I can select the bigger one. Can go to level 1 and maybe move this one here. And then, as you know, you have, for example, this is like the mirror. You can actually, what you can do is create a line, LI, from the middle. LI is the line, model line that comes in green, and is the one that's under architecture. That's good to model stuff. So it's not good to exist later on when you present the project. The one that you want to use to actually put on a project that you want to use it as an AutoCAD line, it's under annotate, and is the detail line. Okay, you can always select one line and convert to the other one by using convert lines. Okay, to go back and forth. I'm using this line because I'm going to select the door, and I'm going to do this mirror pick axis. Oh. And then I can also copy this one and go take it exactly to the middle. Okay, so I have a lot of light from here, light from the front. So I think this rendering should look quite nice. I'm going to place a couple, just a simple partition. Interior partition are the ones on the bottom. I see some of you be careful being, lazy about choosing a nice if a nice partition, a nice wall, when you say wall, don't just choose the first one that comes to you. At least make a decision, is it exterior or interior? And then if it's interior, think of it as thicker. It's between a more public environment and a more private environment. It's thinner. It's probably between two environments that don't need to have an acoustic quality between them. No? So always think a little more carefully about what type of partition you're choosing in general. No? Anyway, I have that one there. And I could even make a, I'm gonna hide this guy for a second. I'm gonna edit the profile. Why not? And I'm gonna oops, actually now that I'm thinking. What I want to do is wireframe WF, select the wall, attach both bays. This allows you to attach one wall to the roof, for example. Boom, notice how it went up and it just went against the roof right there. Now HL, I'm using shortcuts to go from wireframe to hidden line. Hidden line is HL, wireframe is WF, so you can do that quite fast. And I can edit profile. I just there. Okay, I'm not gonna do it then. Okay, so I'm gonna create a camera. When you create a camera, you can go here to camera, and you click once. Don't stay here. Don't lift your finger until you're way beyond everything. So this actually allows to see further or less. So if I actually stop there, I wouldn't be seeing almost anything, just the front of the partition there. So, be careful that when you actually create a camera that you click once and you keep your finger pressed and then you drag all the way as far as you can, because that's as far as you can see as well, okay? Anyway, create a view and the 3D views. It's good to rename this. You can even call it a render one. So you can always go back there. And first thing everybody needs to do is to make sure that you have the best shot that you can get out of your project. No? It's not only the cropping region, which obviously is very important to make sure that's correct, which in a way has to be proportional to our panel, no? So make sure it's landscape as best as possible. That's one thing, but there's also an opportunity to, whoops, I think we lost it. It's funny. Okay, well, I wonder why. For some reason, the little wheel here, I will take a look at it and see where it is. It has to be under view, I imagine. Here's, okay, so if you don't have it under user interface, navigation bar, it's important. You get this stuff. Okay, this you can do a fly through. We'll talk about it in the future, but this one is important. It's the navigation wheel. If you click once, it's a little monster that follows your mouse. Okay, you should, before you start rendering like crazy, you should actually make sure you're looking properly to the project. Normally, there's something that maybe is a tendency of these days that the cropping region or the frame of the camera, it's tends to be smoother to the eye when it's as close as possible parallel to the vertical lines of your project. So this is like a little off, no? So what you can do is start looking, making sure that those lines, again, the frame line and the project lines, the vertical, are somehow parallel. That is difficult to do when you're looking up if you have a double space and so on. but there are ways to fix that as well. You can up down, you can lower the position of the camera. That would mean that the person theoretically is either shorter or taller or just leaning down maybe against the floor, no? Sometimes it creates a very interesting effect, which you might be interested in looking for. Walk, you can walk forward or around. It's almost like using the cursor. I'm keeping my mouse pressed from the left button, and you can move around. If you don't like that move, you can always rewind. Rewind, you click, maintain, and you can go back in time. It's almost like a Control Z or Z for the camera view. Okay. You also have the center. You can maintain press and click on a particular element. It attracts to some point. And what it would do is actually center the camera to that element. Okay. I haven't used this almost ever, but it might be useful for you. Who knows? Zoom is quite obvious. You can zoom in and out. Orbit, you can orbit the entire element. And pan, quite straightforward. There's one extra set that is under here, under this little triangle, and you can set many other things, how you see the wheel, the level camera, but there's also an option which is the increase decrease focal length. This allows you to increase the lenses, which in your project, which is a little bit small space, a little bit might help to create a sensation or a feeling that the space is bigger than what it is. Okay, so that's pretty much the camera setting. That's right here on the wheel. Rendering setting is the teapot. Super teapot. The setting, medium, high, best. I recommend always starting medium, and even screen, so it's like relatively fast. Then you go exterior sun, the type of lighting you want. In your projects, you're gonna use interior, and you should use sun and artificial. You're gonna have artificial lights, so you want them to be working. The second you do that, you can click here, and you will be given a list of lights that you have, and you can turn them on and off. You can say this one off, that one off, whatever it is. Remember the sun settings, you should have located your project properly, the north, true north, and the location, etc., etc. Background, this is what you see behind the windows. So, and also affects the amount of light that comes into the scene and how the shadow comes in. So you choose whatever you think is best. You can choose your own image as a background. Okay, if you choose image, you can it shows you a frame in red, and you can browse here for whatever image you want, and it will be placed there, which is good. It's another
question with the image. If you choose your own, will it, and you want it to be like, I don't know, maybe in the windows, like that's what's outside those windows, that curtain wall, will it like orient to the perspective view?
Yeah, it's a very, let's call it a dummy background option. V-Ray has a more powerful one, but what it does is it understands where the camera is, and it places the image always perpendicular to the camera. So if you rotate the camera, the image is also rotated. So if you know where your camera is, then in a way you should search for what view is outside that is corresponding with that camera.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So that's tricky, because if I actually use the orbitate here, if I orbit, just imagine I go there, and I use the teapot customer size, it's going to place it also perpendicular. So if you do that in 4 or 5 renderings, imagine north, south, whatever, you're going to have always the same background outside, which obviously does not make any sense. So I will try to be either smart about it, find different backgrounds that correspond to your project and place them in different perspectives. Or maybe you want to work in Photoshop the image you have and maybe give them a different tone so they feel slightly different. Does that make sense? Or so it is not a very powerful tool, but it's good. Okay, we can use it now right after. For now I'm gonna use the very few clouds. Anyway, adjust exposure is fundamental because this will allow you to tone down or darker or change the shadows intensity and so on. But I always recommend you use it after you do the first rendering under medium resolution. So if you do rendering here, now notice that I'm saying interior sun artificial, but I don't have any artificial light. So it's not gonna render any artificial light. Okay, so notice it's definitely burn in the area where there's a curtain wall, which makes sense. It's a lot of light, but once it's done the rendering and before you render the final resolution or the best resolution possible, you should go to adjust exposure. Now is the time to do and say, hey, darker, and change this one at least on the top slightly because it does a big difference. Notice how the sky starts becoming a little blue. Problem. Well, as you change that, this gets better, but this one gets worse. Maybe you want to change the sun setting. Maybe it's a little later in the day, and then the light's a little more orange. It's what it is. Maybe you want to introduce a specific type of artificial light, whether it's darker, no, etc., etc. Highlights, you can make them darker or brighter. Sorry, darker or brighter. The shadows could be lighter, maybe. That makes sense. Saturation. This is basically a color issue, so gray with no color. And then this intense is like poppy. So you normally want to be towards the center, but depends on the project. It tends to be more efficient, maybe a series more, I don't know, an office that is more about concentrating. So maybe the colors are toned down a little bit. But if you're more in a children playground, I would I would pop up the colors a bit more. No, so it depends on the project. You can work with these things, and then cooler versus warmer is like towards the blue tones and towards the yellow and reds. So again, it's depending on what mood you want to give. It's an afternoon type of rendering. You want to go towards the warmer. But if it's like a morning or I don't know, whatever program, if it's better, there's a little colder in an environment, you want to take it towards the cooler. Needless to say, almost all of these things are important that you tweak a little bit and you're comfortable now, but you should take it also to Photoshop and implement further changes. Once you say okay here, you can change to high resolution and it will save those adjustments. Okay. How do we render a high resolution image? It's a printer. You want to go to, as I say, 300. Maybe 600 is not necessary, I think. 300 dpi is density of pixels. And you say render, and it will take a longer time. So don't render unless you have the luxury to not use the computer. Okay. Another way to render, and we will talk about it in a second, is the render farm. Render farm is basically Mr. Autodesk, our friend Autodesk, has a bunch of computers in a storage space in the middle of a desert, who knows where. And what it does is basically through internet is sending your project information to those computers. And our friend, Mr. Autodesk, renders everything for us. Because they have so many computers, it goes just like that, no? Super fast. It's called cloud computing, cloud rendering, and so on. And we will see that in a second. Here is. Okay, you have the render is the teapot, same as down here. And you have rendering cloud. Rendering cloud, what you need to do is exactly these 3 steps. Step 1, on the next screen, select 3D views and start rendering. Step 2, the service will notify you when your images are ready. Select step 3, select view, render gallery, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can say, do not show me this again. You say continue. Please save the project. I haven't saved it. Okay, you won't see this page unless you have signed in to your Revit account. How to do that? Notice up here, I'm actually say Severino Alfonso. I am signed in. So if you haven't signed in, when you say rendering cloud, I think the first thing will say sign in. So just make sure you have your Autodesk, I believe, password and username and so on. Once you come in here, you can say what render you want. I want render 1. What type? A still image. That's what I want, still image. And then render quality. You will normally say final. You don't want to mess standard ones. And then here size, you normally want like large, extra large. If you want the big one, extra large, I think should be fine, but you can take it to maximum and see what happens. And then exposure, I will keep it as it is. It might be native, but you can do this very fast. So try both. Native, I think it means that is the one that you have set, the adjustments that you have set. But you can keep it as advanced for now and then change it as you see. Then you can render, it closes. You can keep working in Revit. And again, those computers owned by Autodesk in the desert, whatever it is doing those renders for you. They send you an email. You go to the web, and you can download those renderings, and they normally take very little depending on the rendering. Okay. Here's the render gallery. Actually, goes to the web and opens the renderings. Okay, see, I have to actually sign in here. Here, you will have something like that. So, Alfonso, be a project, and you can see all of the, I only have one. It's probably from whatever other time I've done this. Okay, so quite straightforward. 412, 410. I'm going to save this, and I think I'm going to call it a day because I think it's a day for us to think about life. And I will start from this very point. Let me close